Thanks to Card Market for sponsoring this video.
Hello there. Welcome to the Familiar Podcast, where we discuss leveling up your game in Pauper. And I'm Peter, and I'm here with Marsh from StrataGames. And today we're going to talk about a follow-up from our discussion on brewing last week, because Marsh here has a sweet new brew for us to discuss.
Yeah, so last week we talked about how the Black Sack deck came about in general, kind of getting to the point where it's been a bit of a contender for the last year or so in like a tier 2 meta or whatever. And I recently brewed up this new list with a rainbow sideboard, basically. So using two main cards, the card that already sees a lot of play in the deck, which is Shambling Ghast, which can make a treasure when it dies. Then also Greedy Freebooter, which is another card that we played a little bit when the deck was in its nascent form, but found that it just wasn't really good enough. But it's another creature that makes treasure when it dies. And so we have these 8 treasure makers, and those are all we're using to splash just about anything in the sideboard, because they can make mana of any color, obviously. So it allows us to have access to a lot of colors, which one of the biggest drawbacks to mono black sacrifice is that it's mono black. You don't have answers to a lot of the things that black can't deal with.
Yeah, and let's even take a step back further. So where did the idea for this new brew version of this deck come from?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an idea. I don't want to take all of the credit for it or anything. I think it's an idea that people have had in the Black Sack Discord for a while, but it's just like the classic, you're just watering down your main game plan. You're adding a bunch of bad cards to your main deck to get some slightly better cards in the sideboard. So is that really worth it? But I will say when I was at Pauper Genesis, me and two of my friends that we were staying with, David and Xander, were actually brewing this idea in the hotel room before we ended up heading back home. And so we're just trying to spitball, how can we make Black Sack better? Because it's rough in the meta because of some specific matchups, and because black can't deal with those matchups very well. Grixis Affinity being one, Jund being another, and White Weenie being the third. Those are kind of the 3 main matchups that I wanted to kind of try to solve with this brew. So that's kind of where it started.
And that makes sense. And from a competitive standpoint, and this is something I think we discussed on the brewing call a little bit, is one of the starting points for creating a brew, especially when you're iterating on a deck that already exists, is asking yourself the question, what problem you're trying to solve, right? So if the problem you were trying to solve for mono black was, hey, I want mono black to be able to do its strategy faster and do what it does already faster, then this would definitely not be the approach. I would imagine. But what is the problem that you're trying to solve with these changes?
Yeah, so you're definitely right. It's not getting any faster this way. In fact, we're slowing ourselves down, because the main change was that Greedy Freebooter came in, and I mostly had to replace Infestation Sage. I have only one in the list that I ran. And the big problem with that is that Infestation Sage, like a lot of our fodder creatures, makes 2 bodies for just 1 mana, which grows your creatures twice as fast. Greedy Freebooter does not do that. And so we are quite a bit slower. But the main problem that I wanted to solve, I mentioned Grixis Affinity and Jund. It's Krark Clan Shaman. Any player who knows that they want to play a go wide creature deck, especially on the ground, knows that Krark Clan Shaman can just totally shut out strategies. And of course, giving it Death Touch is the big thing. So we can have a 10/10 Carrion Feeder or Beetle or multiple of those. And if they give it Death Touch, there's just not much we can do. Now, for a while, we've had a resource package, removal package, basically just dedicated to killing Krark before it gains Death Touch. So the Shambling Ghasts can give -1/-1 to pick it off. Often we're running up to 4 Snuff Outs and Tragic Slips. And the very reason for all of that is so that we can kill Krark Clan Shaman before it gains Death Touch. That makes the Jund matchup quite a bit better. And in certain situations, it can make the Affinity matchup better. But the problem with the Affinity matchup is that they have endless artifacts. So if you have a 8/8 Beetle, they can, if they really need to, sacrifice 8 artifacts usually to be able to wipe your board. And yeah, it sets them back a lot, but if their draws are so much better. So even if they go down to literally nothing on board and you still have your 5 swamps or 3 swamps or wherever you're at, if you're both top decking, they're probably going to top deck better than you, because even if you get a Carrion Feeder, and they have to wait until they get some lands, it's just not going to be enough. And so that's the big problem. With Jund, they only have 3 or 4 artifacts at a time most of the time. And so it's not as big of a deal as long as you can get rid of Death Touch. But Grixis is the number one worst matchup for us for that exact reason.
We were discussing this weekend the one of the biggest features / limitations of Pauper is one is adding colors to your deck, because the land is such a limiter, especially if you're an aggro deck. It slows you down quite a bit. And two is almost better than, I'm trying to think if there's another format that's even more so, but almost better than any other format. Pauper really doesn't break the color pie very often. There's some cards that do, but they're relatively rare or limited to like another color. So for example, there's really not any counter magic in black. So you really do run into that limitation. While at the same time you have all the removal in the world. But like you were saying, a Karkland can burn out an entire board given enough artifacts.
Yeah, exactly. The problem is that we can only remove creatures once they've already resolved. And Krark, once it's resolved, can already do its thing no matter what. And so that was getting into some of the specifics of the brew was that I wanted to be able to counter a Krarkland Shaman on the stack. And what's the best way to do that? Probably Blue Elemental Blast. Single blue mana. You can counter any red creature or any red spell at all. And they don't have the ability to then sacrifice everything to wipe your board. And so that was honestly where I started with the rainbow sideboard, like adding cards to the sideboard was I want to be able to keep Krark off the field.
Yeah. And so once you enter into that package of being able to counter this and solve this problem, it looks like, while reviewing your sideboard, it came to the realization, hey, you're not just splashing blue. You can splash multiple colors, and that brought you to add some other cards. Can you tell me a little bit about Temur Battle Rage and your decision to add that one?
Yeah, so all the treasure makers, like you said, they produce mana of any color. So as long as it's a single pip, I actually don't have to care what any card costs. Obviously, I want to keep the costs to like 1 or 2 mana. But yeah, Temur Battle Rage was alongside Fling were actually the cards that are not mono black that are in the main deck. I ran one in the main and one in the side of each of them. And originally I was just going to do a couple of Flings in the main deck because actual Fling is something that we've been wanting for Black Sack for a while. We, of course, usually have Rite of Consumption, which is great, but it is sorcery speed. And so often people will, hold up their counter magic and then tap out the end step. And if I could then fling at them, that would be a great way to catch them off guard. But for Temur Battle Rage, I realized that fling kind of acts as like double strike if you can get your creature in once already. So if you get attack in for 8 damage and then fling it, you've done 16 damage. But if they have a chump blocker, then that's not the case. You're only dealing that initial 8 damage because they'll just block with a 1/1 or whatever. And so I wanted actual double strike. And so I was like, well, a Temur Battle Rage does that. It gives trample, because quite often in a lot of matchups, you're going to get to the point where they, White Weenie this way, Elves, any deck that goes wide, they're just going to chump block you every single turn. And that's very effective for them if you don't have a lot of removal, unblockable, or your flings or anything like that. And I was like, well, people will even tap out because they're like, oh, I have blockers. It's not a big deal, especially if they're at, 18 life or whatever. But if you have a 9/9 coming in, they block with a 1/1, and then you Temur Battle Rage it, you hit them for 17. Often that's going to kill them. And so, and also, like, who doesn't love Temur Battle Rage? It's just one of my favorite cards anyway.
When I've played this matchup running the mono white weenies deck versus Black Sack, so not this version, that's definitely a piece of it, right? Because my creatures end up being free at some point for the most part when they're generating clues with them, or you're running or you're creating with Battle Screech for 1/1s in a turn, and it basically gives you infinite chump blockers, and then you're able to turn that corner. And having another version of like a fling type effect that is able to push through would be scary for me as a mono white player.
Yeah. The other thing with that was obviously you need 2 treasures for this, but I was also thinking, like, do I want to have the potential of having 2 flings in hand, which if I only have 1 big creature doesn't do me much good, or if I have 1 of each, theoretically I could Temur Battle Rage, get in for a bunch of damage, and still fling if I needed to finish them off. And so I wanted to diversify for that reason too.
No, that makes sense. So you incidentally gained some advantage in another matchup that I wouldn't say is necessarily a bad matchup, but a little bit more of a challenging matchup for sure.
Yeah, and sorry, one more point on that is that I mentioned at the top the 3 matchups that I wanted to target, and that was White Weenie was one of those 3. And Teamer Battle Rage and Fling are both, I think, very good in the White Weenie matchup. They have the chump blockers, so the Teamer Battle Rage is going to get them out of nowhere. And Fling is instant speed. Often they'll tap out at their end step for a clue or something like that. But also Fling deals the damage, which means that it's going to be a red source of damage. So if they're playing, well, they're always playing Prismatic Strands. If they have a Prismatic Strands and maybe they've even used it that turn, if they flashed it back or something to prevent all damage from black sources, you can Fling and then actually still kill them because it's a red source dealing the damage. So that's also another benefit to it not being actual right of consumption.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense. And then I also see in here a Mask of Law and Grace. What was your thoughts behind that one?
Yeah, this is the one that I think is the coolest because it's probably the most niche of the cards. And so yeah, Mask of Law and Grace gives protection from black and red for just a single white mana, and it's an enchantment that sits on your creature. And so this is a card that sees a good amount of play in Mono White Heroic and also Bogles. For basically this exact problem, which is usually Krark Clan Shaman. Of course, Krark is one of the best ways to get around hexproof or ward or anything like that as well. And so that's always a problem that those go tall Voltron decks need to deal with. And this is just a single mana, really cheap and easy way to preemptively keep your board from dying to that. But also it just catches Galvanic Blast, Lightning Bolt, Cast Down, like all of these different things. And if your opponent's playing mono red or mono black, you can also just give unblockable. So it does a ton of things that you need. But again, probably the number one reason I put this in was to preempt a Krark Clan Shaman. So I wanted multiple ways to be able to survive a Shaman. And of course, Blue Blast on the stack is great, being able to catch it there. But then also if I can just, Jund and Grixis, most of the removal is all red, or for Jund, black as well with Cast Down. If you can just put a Mask of Law and Grace on your one creature, you're going to be able to keep that creature alive probably for the entire game. Now, the unblockability is a little bit more tenuous for those matchups because they have Chrysalis and Mere Enforcer, which are colorless. There's Ultra Monitors and there's Hydras and stuff like that. But it still sometimes can come up, and really just keeping your creatures alive is the most important thing.
Looking at the deck, we see that you brewed this deck to try to solve the problem of a few decks that were limiting mono black sack from really entering into the level of tier 1 in the format. And with the hopes that this might kind of push it across the line, give it a little bit closer to 50-50 matchups, or give you a shot in some matchups that might have just been a near loss every time, which is great. Has there been any success with it?
Yeah, a little bit for sure. So I took it to 2 local events last week, both which were 4-round events, and I managed to go 8-0 across all of those, which is obviously a very good showing. I was playing against a couple players who were a little new to the format, playing some brews that were not the best, but I also played against some pretty good players, and I played against Rakdos Madness, Mono Blue Terror, which is already pretty favored for Black Sack, and some other ones. But I think across those 8 matches, I had like 5 or 6 post sideboard games that I really caught my opponent off guard. Definitely a lot of this deck is surprise factor. So there definitely needs to be a lot more testing to know if this is a good enough strategy to stand on its own once people are actually aware that it's going to be happening. Mm-hmm. So that's something I'm not 100% sure of yet. But against Rakdos Madness, my first round at my locals on Friday, I game 2 was able to counter a Grab the Prize with a Blue Elemental Blast out of nowhere. He was pretty much just on air at that point, like had grabbed the prize and discarded his only other card, and I was able to counter it. He never once anticipated that would have happened, so he just suddenly didn't have any cards in hand, and that obviously was very beneficial for me. I was able to counter an Inside Out and a Sheltering Word from the Abzan Life combo deck that's kind of been going around. Both of those with the Dispel that, again, my opponent wasn't anticipating. But here's the thing. Like, in those situations, a Snuff Out or a Tragic Slip would have done exactly the same, and even more, because I would have been able to kill the creature, not just like stop the combo. And I've taken out Tragic Slips from my sideboard, and I do still have the Snuff Outs in order to put these other cards in. So like, it worked in those situations, but also would it have just been better if I had better cards that weren't like muddling up my draws and stuff like that, and like my mana and stuff? I'm not 100% sure. I think the biggest success I got was I was playing against Mardu Synth with a really good player, and he got a turn 2 makeshift munitions, which is pretty good against us, and it can obviously be a big problem. But he tapped out for something else the following turn, and I was able to play a vampire, immediately sacrifice my Shambling Gas to get a treasure, and then put a Mask of Law and Grace on it. And suddenly all of his removal was nullified. He did, I think, said he had like a Thraben Charm in there, but he'd have to find a Thraben Charm to blow up the mask and then find a kill and then be able to kill my vampire. And I just didn't give him time to do that. I was able to just attack in. I think I had the stamina Shambler and just pretty much killed him right away.
And the Blue Elemental Blast also gives you some enchantment removal, right? That's the other limiter of mono black, is if someone's running red enchantments, and really the red enchantment to look out for is that makeshift munitions, which is basically unanswerable usually for you.
Exactly. Like black is bad at getting rid of any of our artifacts or enchantments, and artifacts are so prevalent in the format, obviously, but also even enchantments. Yeah, makeshift munitions can be a real pain, so it is nice to have that too.
I've run into two as well with running Rainbow Elves in the past. One of the kind of the beauties of the deck, and it's kind of a secret, I think the secret realization that I found, is it makes other decks really hard to sideboard against you. So like you running an almost all mono black deck and splashing Blue Elemental Blasts does not really give those red decks permission to bring in their red blast just for that one card that you're bringing in against them. And so it really just makes it more difficult for them to sideboard, because if they bring in those red elemental blasts and you just don't draw your Blue Elemental Blast, it's just a dead card for them. And it doesn't really stop your main game plan. So I think there's a real advantage there, where you make your deck even harder for them to answer by kind of going this route.
I totally agree. I've always, like, one thing that I always say about Black Sack is that I already love it because it's so hard to sideboard against, because your board wipes can be okay. Sometimes I go really wide. You can catch me off guard, but often I'll just sack all those creatures, turn it into a big giant creature, and your breath weapon doesn't do much. And vice versa, if you just cast down my giant creature, okay, I'll just hit you with a bunch of 1/1s. And so you kind of have to have both, which is really tough for people. And then often people are bringing in Graveyard Hate against me, Fairy Macabres and Nile Spellbombs, and it's like, that can catch my Unearth sometimes, or my Supernatural Stamina from bringing a creature back. But if I'm like stamina-ing on a Shambler, I'm still already getting +2 squirrels. So you've traded like a whole card for like maybe half a card, a couple of 1/1s. And so all of that makes it so difficult for them to deal with your deck anyway. And then now if I have Mask of Law and Grace, they're not bringing in enchantment removal against me. There's no world. So unless they already have that Thraben Charm or something, they're never going to be able to get rid of it. And then, like you said, nobody's bringing in red blasts to counter my blue blasts or dispels, because like they would mostly be a waste.
A little bit of a spoiler too. Marsh and I were at a Win-A-Duel this past week, and so coming up later this week, there'll be some more content to share about this deck in regards to that as well. Some exciting content there.
Yeah, we didn't mention it at the top. Actually, this will be coming out on Friday. The report will be coming out on Wednesday. So there's already going to be a report up on the channel of me playing this deck at the Win-A-Duel. So we wanted to talk here about the brewing, but yeah, if you want to check out how the deck did, obviously check out that video.
Great. What about the future? So you're kind of in the infancy of iteration in the strategy of running a rainbow version of this. Do you think there's a future to test some more cards regarding this strategy?
I think so. I definitely, I was looking at tons and tons of cards. There was one that I really wanted to fit in, which was Robe of Mirrors, which is a blue mana for an enchantment that gives Shroud to your creature. And I thought that would be really cool. I realized after the fact, after I tried to start adding it in, that the things I really want Shroud from are all red and black. So like maybe, you're playing a Demon Inferior or something like that. But if you're playing Demon Inferior, you're already playing Mono Blue Terror. I already have a good matchup there. Like I really wanted these cards to target my bad matchups. Mm-hmm. So that was a card I didn't really get to fit in. Another one I thought about was Rancor. Of course, a card that we've always wanted to put in the deck. The main problem is that Rancor's strength comes in the fact that it comes back to your hand every time it dies. And I really wanted every single card in this list that I'm splashing. I wanted you to only need one treasure to alter the course of the game, because with only 8 treasure sources, there's no guarantee you're going to get one in every game. And even if you do, there's no guarantee you're going to get more than one. So Rancor could be really good on a nested shambler. You get 2 extra squirrels and then you bring it back. It can be great on any of your growers because it gives you trample. But if it dies and goes back to your hand, are you really going to have another green mana to be able to use it? Probably not. So all of the cards that I added, Temur Battle Rage can kill your opponent on the spot. Fling can kill your opponent on the spot. A Dispel countering a key Cast Down or Galvanic Blast can alter the course of the game. Same with the Blue Elemental Blast and the Mask of Longgrace. And then we also, I don't think, talked yet about the Flaring Pain, which is also in the sideboard as just a one of. Again, another card I was using to target mono white, especially, but also any deck playing Prismatic Strands. There are quite a few Gates decks running around now with those. People generally think that a Prismatic Strands is going to give them this impenetrable wall, and they're usually right, especially against a mono black deck. We've already had some recourse against that with the fact that we have tokens that are mono green and mono red, and you can put Sadistic Lees on them to make them bigger and stuff like that. But I just figured, why go to all that trouble if I can just attack, they go for a Strands, and I just Flaring Pain them. So yeah, all of the cards are meant to be cheap, 1 pip, and alter the course of the game. If we put more treasure makers in the deck, I think we were talking about like Blood Celebrant, not a treasure maker, but it's just a black mana for a 1/1. You can pay a black and a life to make a mana of any color. That would give you a repeatable way to make mana of other colors. So maybe we try a list that runs a couple of those, and then we do get our Rancors, or we do get some other cards that like you need more than once, but they are really, really strong when you get them. So there's a lot of potential for the deck still, I think.
Sometimes I found when you do make a brew change to a deck, it creates new issues for the deck. Did you feel like there were new issues that were created by going down this strategy, or?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, definitely some. The big one was kind of what we mentioned up top, which is that the deck was slower. Generally, your stock Black Sack list, I would say it's not difficult to have a turn 4 win if your opponent doesn't disrupt you. So if you are playing against Jund and they just have a slow draw with no removal, or if you're playing against Tron or something like that, you can often put up the beetles or the vampires or whatever and get there really quick. But it was very infrequent that I felt that I had that possibility because I just didn't have as many creatures that were making 2 bodies was the big thing, like I mentioned before. So there was that. And then also there were some times where like I did draw the Fling or the Temur Battle Rage in our main deck and just didn't have the way to use it. Greedy Freebooter, the Scry actually was a little more helpful than I was anticipating it would be. There were a couple times where I kept a 1-lander, as I often do, and then I would like Village Rites it, and I'd get the Scry beforehand, put a card on the bottom, and then draw 2, and the last card of those 2 that I drew was my land. So there was some utility there, but it definitely slowed the deck down. And could I have done just as well at the events that I went to and the locals and stuff if I just had the stock list that was a lot faster? Potentially. So yeah, there's like, I guess I played 14 matches with it now, and it's still 16 matches. 16 matches with it now, and I think it's still very like new. It's not a lot of time to really determine if it's if the juice is worth the squeeze.
The next comes the part that I'm most excited for, which is now this deck will be available for people to see. People will be able to kind of iterate on that deck, and I'm excited to see where that goes. I'm excited to see what cards, especially with treasure tokens being the source of mana, I'm excited to see what cards come out of the woodwork where people have ideas to bring them in. I'm excited to see how far people push it. Like maybe throwing in a few more color fixers means that you can start splashing even wilder sideboard cards, like even like Dust to Dust. That would be, be a wild one with two white pips, but who knows?
I thought about Dust to Dust, and if we could make the mana work, I'd love that. I will say the reason that I didn't end up putting any actual artifact removal in was because like a Cast into the Fire or something, just removing one artifact didn't really do what I was saying before, where I fully alter the course of the game. A Dust to Dust definitely could, but that's 2 white pips. That's pretty tough.
No, that makes a lot of sense. So yeah, I'm excited to see what creative routes people take, how the deck kind of grows from here, or or the other real possibility is that it just kind of falls off. But what it also opens up is as new cards are kind of getting released and new cards start showing up, it gives more direction that this deck can take rather than just sitting there kind of waiting for maybe another guy to sack or another creature that can sack, where it really opens up to a wide range of potential new cards that could be put in this deck. I do find that with Pauper, there are some really good answer cards, but some of the best decks are really hard to answer, at least like completely. Playing other formats like Modern, like someone's running an affinity type deck and you bring in Stony Silence, which turns off all activated abilities of artifacts. Cards like that really can like shut down a deck. We don't really have that as well in Pauper. But we do have cards that do play really well against other strategies. So I'm excited to see kind of what that becomes and how iterations of this deck kind of look like going forward.
Yeah, me too. We were talking about getting this episode out and stuff, and I was like, I really want to. I didn't want, if we were going to do this episode a couple weeks later originally, and I was like, well, I'm playing the deck now. I want to start getting like leagues and stuff like that in, but I don't want to accidentally do too well with it and everyone starts seeing it, and the deck gets spoiled before I'm able to like be properly ready for it and stuff. And so, but now that people are knowing about it, I've posted about it and whatnot. I'm excited to see what people can do with it, because I am just one person, and there's tons of people who are better brewers or better players than me, and can actually and have more time than me to get all the reps in to see if it's actually worth it. Because I'm really not sure. There's definitely some cool stuff you can do, but again, like with the surprise factor being so enormous, like who knows if it'll really be good enough to keep going after a month or 2 or 3.
Last night I had the question of, should I buy 4 Masks of Law and Grace now before they potentially spike this week?
I mean, I truly hate that I apparently have some form of power here, but like a lot of the Black Sack cards were much cheaper before a year ago, and like Right of Consumption was $1 card that's now $5, I think. So I wouldn't be super surprised, but I would not be happy with it either. So
that's good. All right. Well, unless you have any last thoughts on your end.
No, I think that's pretty much it. Certainly make sure to join the Black Sack Discord. There'll be a link in the description to help brew this deck, or just comments. Let us know if there's any ideas that you have, because there's definitely a lot of room for evolution for it.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining the Familiar Podcast today, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.
Take it easy.
So, how are your games going?
Yeah, so of course we've been playing the deck we've been talking about, and I did win against Jund. It was perfect timing because we were talking about Card Clan Shaman screwing you up, and then they played a Card Clan Death Touch, wiped our whole board, which you probably saw if you're watching on YouTube. Now we're against Mono White Heroic, which is not a bad matchup generally, as long as you can get in a Curse Marauder, which we just scryed to the top. So I think we'll be able to get them to chump with this Skyguard and then Marauder away the Spider. But if they have protection, it could throw a wrench in the works. But I think it's worth trying.
Do you think they'll preemptively run the protection? Because you could also Shambling Ghast now ahead of time.
Oh, yeah. I could sack the Shambling to -1/-1 this. But anything they have to target it would give it a counter. So protection, they definitely would. But it could also just be... They don't play a lot of flash things. They don't have mana for Benevolent Blessing.
Yeah, so if you attack in and then they try to pump it, then you could respond with Shambling Ghast. So it kind of forces them to either not block or to kind of try to pump it now.
Yeah, I think I should just attack. The other concern is this is a 5/5 with First Strike. And the Vampire, I guess I have 3 things to sack, plus I have the Ghast to shrink it a little bit. But if they had some way to grow it, I think it's going to be fine, though. I mean, we need to kill this or we're dead. But I think if we attack in with these 2... I mean, this is 7 damage plus 9 if they didn't block, so it's lethal. So they have to block, which is nice. But they could just block with the Spider. Yeah, so they're blocking here. So I'm just going to sack as long as I can kill this in combat, which I have the Ghast if they have anything to try, then I can Marauder this and I should be good. So unless they had like a mutagenic growth or like some free spell.
Right.
But that still isn't going to protect it from the vampire killing it. So I think we're going to be good. Okay. I will say in brewing this deck, I initially took out both Accursed Marauders. They said, yeah, I knew it. Because in my experience, Marauder's really only good. It's really only like really good in against Mono White Heroic, Bogles, or Terror. You've already got to find a matchup against Terror, and the other two are just not that common. So part of me wanted to take them out, but I was also like, I just am someone who hates having no game against certain decks. So if I go up against Bogles, will I just lose? And not always. Sometimes you can race them, but most of the time you're going to have some trouble. And so I was like, yeah, we should probably just leave them in. And then when you go up against them, they're pretty good. Luckily, since they're not Bogles, we can also just bring in Snuff Out because they have Ward and Protection, but we can still sometimes get through that. I think Fling and Temur Battle Rage are probably not super necessary. And then also cutting down the Infestation Sages. I think this is the worst of our double body fodder creatures, but there are matches where it's like really good. Like here, having more flyers would be nice because they often get flying. Having a chump blocker would be good. But it's just this combo of Link Breaker Shambler is just too good to break up.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, like how you decided about which one was the weakest, or versus like cutting there versus I guess somewhere else. But it's really hard to justify cutting like even a Bloodthrone Vampire. Though I've seen some lists where people do cut out a couple.
I thought about I often side out one in matches where it doesn't feel as good. To be honest, this isn't a match where it doesn't feel that good, but it's still something I was thinking about cutting. I thought about going down to 3 for the main list, but it can sometimes just be so good. So I wasn't sure. I did realize that actually if I'm cutting these and I'm not bringing in any of our rainbow stuff, I should actually just be cutting freebooters because they're worse than everything else. So I should probably do this. So I wasn't doing this originally in my like sideboarding for some of the leagues and stuff or like locals, but then I realized, oh well, if I'm bringing in Snuff Outs, like this card is already our worst card. It's just necessary for this. But if I'm not actually doing anything other than mono black, might as well just cut those.
Does Fling hit creature or player?
It does. It could hit a creature for sure.
I mean, you'd never want to be doing that, but I guess if it's a nested Shambler that's pumped, then it might be worth it.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trading like a pumped Shambler for like a 2/2 or something, like it could be okay in the right situation. But their creatures usually get so big that I'd have to be throwing an entire creature. I think this is good enough. I mean, these are the one landers that I keep. Like, if we get another land, it's incredible because we have Carried Feeder, Shambler, Stamina. But also we have a Marauder, so that'll set them back a lot.
Yeah, I saw you keep so many one-landers this weekend.
More, like I keep a lot of one-landers. I kept more one-landers this weekend than ever before. I think it was literally like at least one a match, if not like 2 a match. And 1 or 2 of them didn't work out, but most of them did. So like, I'm not going to stop doing it anytime soon. But look at this one lander that we drew a second land, and now it's like the most incredible hand you've ever seen. Now they also kept a one lander, and they're not a deck that can do that. But but like suddenly I have a guy who could be a 6/6 or 7/7 actually. I have an army of squirrels. I can do it again next turn.
Yeah, I guess your biggest challenge is if they make a big creature with lifelink, then you're gonna have a hard time keeping up.
Yeah. If we get another land and they only had one other creature, I could Marauder and Stamina it. In fact, I don't even have to do that. I can play a Marauder to make them sack the Raptor, sack my Shambler, and then next turn I can Stamina my own Marauder, sack it to a Carrion Feeder, and it'll come back and kill their guy. So because of all of that, I'm not super worried. Frankly, I think it's probably just worth killing their Raptor here so that all of our 1/1s can attack in. And because I have a second Shambler, I'm not even worried about sacking that when I have a Stamina in hand. Like,
the fact that Marauder doesn't allow token sacking is just such a very relevant ability.
It's so good. Like, Tithing Blade is one of my favorite cards. It's such a cool, like, the fact that it's an artifact made Glinthawk decks work and stuff like that. But unfortunately, an Edict that has no restrictions is just not good enough anymore. And so Extract a Confession and a Curse Marauder are 2 of my favorite cards because they're just, in the right situation, they're just everything you want them to be.
Yeah. Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
And
so many squirrels.
We'll go for a little bit of damage here. I don't think I have lethal, but you should always do the math. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So I'm 1 shy.
Mm-hmm.
So for that reason, I don't see a reason to sack anything.
Was there any consideration there putting that on the Marauder and sacking the Marauder just to like lock them out of the game?
There was. Honestly, that might have been the better play. I'm so far ahead, I really don't think it... Like, I didn't give it much thought because I cannot imagine a world where they win this game. But if they actually like had 3 or 4 mana and could have made this like a 10 power, even 14 power with lifelink or something, like, yeah, going for the Marauder probably would have been the better play. But here, like, they can block my Carrion Feeder and they have Vigilance, but all the rest of the guys just...
Yeah, it's going to finish them off.
Yeah, exactly.
Good. All right. Well, I think this is a good place to end. Thanks for sticking around for those of you that stuck around, and we'll see if this league ends up in a 5-0 and you'll see it online later.
I'll be posting it for sure. It would have been posted about 5 days ago, but...
All right. Sounds good. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
See you later.